Hello, Internet. Welcome to a bonus episode of Chai and Chill. And today I have with me romance author Shilpa Suraj. Hi, Shilpa. Welcome to Chai and Chill.
Hi, Aniesha. Thank you for having me here.
And before we start, this is a bit that we do. This is the StoryTel Cup that has been with me forever.
I'm ready.
Hey. So the reason we have a bonus episode is because Shilpa has her first audiobook releasing on the 15th, which is today,
Hey.
called Insta Reddy. So the first question that I have for you is, how was it different writing a story knowing that it was going to be listened to rather than read?
So it was definitely a very different experience for me. But one slightly easier part is that I think even when I normally write, I tend to write more dialogue and less description. And that definitely helped in this as well, because I didn't have to change that so much. I continued to focus on, the dialogue and the banter. But I am so excited to hear my story being narrated because this is new for me as well. And to be very honest, I'm not one of those people who's very hooked onto audiobooks. I still like my good old reading sessions where I sit down and read it. But yeah, I'm super thrilled. I'm very excited. But writing it, for me personally, wasn't all that much of a challenge because, like I said, for me, I've always written more dialogue, and I think that is key when you're looking at something that's going to be heard rather than read.
Okay, so you have long been established as a romance novelist. You have had so many books releasing. So it is safe to assume that you always have stories forming in your head. How long did it take to come up with this particular story?
Not very long, actually. So this is so they said, let's, when they came to me and they asked me to write the story, they said, let's do something fun with, a younger sort of demographic, people who are in college. And when I thought younger, the first thing that came to mind was social media. So I was like thinking, what if we have an Instagrammer meets IIT engineering student kind of story? So it's the typical opposites attract, but in a very fun kind of young, vibrant kind of way, with all of your your Instagram or YouTube or content generation kind of, so all of that added into it. So it was fun. It didn't take long. I mean, it took me 3-4 pitches to come to this, but my earlier pitches were all with older couples, which is what I tend to write. So this is my first time with someone younger, and it was, I have to say, it automatically, this whole vibe of the story was different.
I have this thing where my characters have been growing up as I grow up. So I've been writing since I was in my 20s. So my characters started with their 20s, and now that I'm in my 30s, now they are also growing up. Now it's a little difficult for me to go back and relate to the earlier
I'm going
characters that I
backwards.
wrote. Oh, for you, it's the opposite.
I'm going backwards. I'm reverse aging.
So I remember the youngest character I wrote, she is 17. And then Pratibha read it and she's like, why is she such a brat? I was like, because I was a brat when I was 17.
But that's so true, no? So much of us leaks into, I've had people ask me, why are all your heroines so sarcastic? I'm like, because I'm like, is that really so hard to guess?
So, okay. Speaking of characters and that how we tend to write ourselves into the stories, a part of us, maybe not the whole thing. Do you also get inspired by other people around you when you're writing characters?
I think some traits, definitely, sometimes you see someone who has a very interesting quirk or, some kind of a mannerism that they use. And yeah, definitely. But I wouldn't say any of my characters are like a carbon copy of someone I've met in real life. If not those, I would love to meet the heroes in real life. So I keep telling people when they ask me, are your heroes based on someone real? I'm like, it's called fiction for a reason. It's all imaginary. But definitely a lot of what you see around you seeps in. So, like I said, mannerism, traits, certain characteristics, yes, but not completely based on any one person. No.
Okay, so coming back to Insta Reddy, you said that was the last pitch that went through. What about the
Yeah.
drafts? Did the first draft go to the editors, or there were multiple rewrites before you decided this
No,
is what I'm
no, that's
happy
the
with?
best part. The first draft I sent out was accepted, loved, and went through without any revisions. And I was so thrilled.
Oh,
I was like, yes.
congratulations!
Yeah. I was thrilled about that. Because I mean, any writer will tell you rewriting is like your own personal hell.
It is.
Yeah.
So, how did this particular partnership with StoryTel come about?
Ratna Saxena, the commissioning editor for StoryTel, she reached out to me on Instagram, and like I said, I don't read that many audiobooks. So I saw this message and I screenshotted it and I sent it to Devdatta and I said, hey, I got this message on Instagram. What do you think of it? It's like, you fool. She's like, say yes, say yes. I'm like, oh, okay, sorry, I'll say yes.
I feel like
So
everybody has had that talk with Devdatta Di at one point. Look, why are you being so foolish?
but once I started looking into it and researching it, I was so excited and I was so honored that they actually approached me, and they came and asked if I'd be interested. It's been great working with them. It's been great working with Ratna. She's been absolutely fabulous as an editor. She's so encouraging and so, her enthusiasm for your work is so wonderful that it makes you automatically feel better about yourself and what you're doing. So it's truly been a very, very, very good experience.
That's awesome. Okay, the other thing that I noticed is all your stories, most of your stories, they have universes of their own, like the Kapoor brothers or the Shades of Night series. What does this book have a separate universe altogether, or is it part of one of your already existing universes?
No, it has a separate universe altogether.
What was
So
that like, creating
it's
another
very
universe?
so so any character, at least for me, right? I come from a large family. I mean, our own family is kind of nuclear, but our extended family is large, and we're all very close. So we're all very entangled, and we're all over each other, like those worms you find in a heap. No, we're all like that. So it's very normal for me when I write a character. It's very hard for me to write someone in isolation. So when I write a story, my characters invariably have this large cast, rotating around them because that's the life I know. I mean, I don't live in isolation and I live in like this, massive, manic, chaotic, psychotic environment. So yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's fun to do that. It's fun to give life to all of these grandparents, aunts, uncles, and each family has their own dynamic, their own way of working, their own way of functioning. And it's fun to get that sort of ringside view of it. And it's fun to write it and create it too.
Yes. Which brings me to another very interesting question, that in less than 2 years, you've written more than a dozen books, I believe. So, what is the secret to that writing and publishing routine?
I wish I had a secret. Honestly, if I wasn't working full time and I wasn't parenting full time, I would be able to write more. So I have no secret. I write when my daughter's asleep. I write in gaps between her online classes. I write when she goes down to play with the puppies. I write whenever I can find 5-10 minutes here and there, here and there, here and there. So I don't have a secret. I don't have a schedule. I write because it's my it's my me time. It's that one bit of my life that's just about me, which is not about me being a mother, about me being, or some an employee or having obligations to the company I work with or the work that I do, deadlines. It's not about playing a role for anybody else. I write for myself. So that's my me time. And my me time comes in little bursts of 10 minutes and 15 minutes and 20 minutes. So my laptop is never shut down. It's always on sleep, so I can get to my manuscript quickly. And most nights I write after she sleeps, which is why I look like this. And my dark circles are so dramatically, everyone's like, you didn't clean off your kajal. I'm like, no, that's not kajal. That's permanent under eye dark circles.
You are very inspiring to hear that I write whenever I find time, because most people just complain. Most aspiring authors just complain that I am not finding the time. Because I think the whole problem is people think that in order to write, you need to block out 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. But this is nice that you can just sneak in writing time, and that is how you finish your book.
5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it's all writing time if you can find. And I honestly feel if something is important for you, and I don't mean that just with writing, I see so many people saying, someone didn't reply to me because they're really busy. If something or someone is really important to you, you will make the time.
That's true. But what do you do if you have multiple stories going on in your head and you don't know which one to write first?
I do have multiple stories going on in my head. And I do have several unfinished drafts also, as Devdata will attest to. I send her little snippets here and then she's like, what happened to that? I'm like, I'll get to it at some point. But I think at any given point of time, there's one story that sort of starts to drive you more than the others. And when that happens, that's the story that you need to get out, at least for me. And sometimes you have deadlines from publishers, and then you know which story you have to write, whether you like it or not. So that's a different ballgame.
Now, as authors, we also know that merely writing the book or getting published is not enough. You also have to market your book and market it well. So, do you have any things, wisdom that you've collected over the years to share with our aspiring authors?
When my first 2 books came out with Mills and Boon, I didn't have a clue about anything. I just figured I have written a book. Mills and Boon is publishing it, and the whole world is going to read my book and know I exist and ask for my autograph. I think other than my mother, nobody bought my book. So, I genuinely didn't know that there was more that had to be done, and neither did I have anyone to ask. I didn't know anybody who would guide me or tell me. But I think it's extremely important. Marketing is very important, because if people don't know you exist, how are they going to read your work? So if they don't know your work exists, that does not mean that you accost every person you meet online and offline and say, read my book. Or spam them with messages and, say, my book link, buy it now. Please don't do that. As someone who gets a lot of those messages, it's extremely strange to be told by a stranger whom you've never interacted with that you should read their book. But I'm often told that, one, I feel like as authors, if you're looking at this as a career, is this as something that you're going to do long term? Stop believing and expecting that your friends and family are going to buy and read your book. It's not fair on them for you to expect that. 2, don't be offended by people who ask for free copies, because it's going to happen. There's no point wasting time being offended. 3, I think it's extremely important, and it's very hard for someone like me who's an introvert to say this or to do this, but it's very important to realize that if you're doing this long term and if you're writing many books, your books are not the brand, you are the brand. If people find you interesting, they're more willing to give your books a try. So it's very hard, like I said, for people like me. I'm a complete introvert. It takes me a lot to put myself out there. If you leave me to it, I will just bury under my comforter and I'll be like, I'm good. I'll just write another book. It doesn't matter. No one reads it. But the thing is, if you write a book and no one reads it, you may as well write a diary or a journal and keep it at home. No? The whole point of writing that book is that somebody who is not related to you through blood or otherwise will read it. So for that, marketing extremely important. Putting yourself out there, letting people know you exist is extremely important. Yes. It's hard to do. It's not the easiest thing in the world, and there's no one size fits all. It's not that, oh, this worked for this person, so I should do exactly that and it will work for me too. That doesn't work either. I think just like you bring a unique flair to your writing and to your books, you need to bring that same unique flair to your marketing as well for it to work. Or you could be like me and be a dismal flop at marketing and still give marketing advice.
Or you can outsource it. There are people who are way better at marketing.
Pay attention when the experts speak. I'm not an expert, just so you guys know. Not in marketing.
I get scolded a lot where I recently started talking about my books, but I get scolded a lot for not talking about it enough. And I said, because I go, but should I talk about it so much?
But it's, like every time someone says, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I head HR and PR for a firm. And there are so many people who say, why do you never say you write books? I'm like, I don't know. Because I don't know how to say I write books. And they're like, oh, you do? Has it been published? Does anyone know of it? And I'm like, I head HR for a firm. Thank you.
Oh, but
So,
I
yeah,
do tell people that I write, but this is something I should ask you. How many times have you met people when they find out that you're a writer, they go, I have a story, I think you would love it. Will you write it for me?
I've met two kinds of people, okay? Not will you write it for me. I met two kinds of people, and it's very important. One will say, oh, you write books? Hey, I also write. No, I've already, you know what? I want to know, I want to pick your brain on how to publish and how to go about getting this book out, which publisher I should pitch with. I'm like, oh, how wonderful. I'd love to help you out. So, like your draft is ready? No, I wrote about 500 words. I'm like, okay. So that's one. Then there's the other set whom you talk to and you say, oh, I write books. And they're like, you write books? I don't read. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm not forcing you to read my books or any other books. It's not personal. I don't write books that like you. Like, oh my God, I don't read. Like, I'm like, okay.
Yes, there's always this thing that anybody who talks about books or writing or anything, other people think that it's a cult and we are forcing people to go into it, and we are not. We are genuinely telling you that I like this book. You don't have to read it.
Exactly. But I mean, then there are the people who ask you, they're like, oh, you love reading, right? I'm like, oh yeah, I love reading. They're like, you must recommend books to me. I'm dying, yeah, I have nothing new to read. And then, I send off this slew of book recommendations. I'm like, this one's awesome, that one's awesome, blah, 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 blah. And then 2 days later, I get a message saying, I read that book you recommended. I thought it was crap. I stopped reading it. It was like 30%. I'm like, you didn't have to tell me. You could have just stopped. It's all right. You didn't like what I liked. There's no need to specifically come back and tell me. And then say, is there anything else you'd recommend? I'm like, no. I don't have anything else to recommend you. Thank you.
All right. This brings me to the last question, which is, what are your writing goals for this year? I'm going to ask you for this.
I don't have goals. I don't have a goal. I don't have schedules. I don't have anything. I just know I want to write stories that I love. And I truly hope that people will read what I write and enjoy it as much as I enjoy writing it. That's all the goal that I have.
That's awesome.
And that's all the schedule that I can promise.
Okay. So thank you so much for joining us on Chai and Chill, and we wish you all the best for all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Aniesha.
Insta Reddy will be available on StoryTel on the 15th.
Yes, thank you.
So you can go listen to it.
Yes, go listen to it and tell me you love it.
And I will link all of Shilpa's social medias down below along with your Amazon. So if anybody watching this wants to go see all her other books, you can.
Thank you, Aniesha, for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you.